There is an alien among us. A superior being from a place called Krypton. Deep in the heart of the city, he watches for signs of danger. Ready to act on a moment's notice. His true name is Kal-El. You know him as Superman.
Maybe you ladies haven't heard about me.
The future of Metropolis is in the hands of the Man of Steel. Get up!
Superman!
Get up. He's gonna be busy.
I said get up.
Superman.
Welcome, everyone, to the DCAU review, episode 198. My name is Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we have a very special episode this week. We've been talking about Superman, the animated series, all month long, and here on this last Saturday in February, we are still talking about Superman, the animated series, but rather than a particular episode, we are bringing back what is now kind of becoming an established concept on this series, which is one of our character spotlight episodes.
That is correct, Liam, and it's an honor to be here with you on episode 198, and I will say this week is one of the big bads, not only of Superman the Animated Series. He continues with his presence throughout the rest of the DCAU and the follow-up series, of course, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. We, of course, are talking about Darkseid. That's right. The big bad Jack Kirby Fourth World creation, and we are excited to bring you volume 1 of Darkseid. If you recall, our last spotlight episode was on Hawk Girl, and that episode in particular, we discussed that, hey, there's actually a lot of content here for some of these characters. So our very first spotlight was Blight. It was encapsulated. He was a one-season character. We were able to kind of get everything into one episode. That won't be the case with every character, as we've now proven with our last two. But so we have pretty much Darkseid in Superman the Animated Series, with the exception of his final appearance in Superman the Animated Series, which we will leave sort of as a good segue into volume 2 when we get there down the road. But I'm excited to talk to you about, probably, Liam, what I guess is the biggest bad of the Superman the Animated Series, maybe outside of Lex Luthor himself.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll certainly get into a lot of his earlier appearances in Superman in a moment here. But yeah, as far as the big bads of the series, you have your Parasites and Metallos and Live Wires, and then maybe a tier above that, you have Brainiac and Lex Luthor and ones like that. But yeah, they really did set up Darkseid, as we will talk about today, as really just this entire other level of threat. And they used it as a way to tell really interesting stories, and I think a way to give some strong character development for some of the other characters in Metropolis, as we will certainly talk about as these episodes come rolling in. But yes, are, as you mentioned, the character of Darkseid, who has since his inception, but especially I think in the last 20 years, he's really taken over as the big bad for DC. So, but he first appeared back in Superman Jimmy Olsen, number 134, which was written and drawn by Jack Kirby, with inks by Vince Scaletta. That was sort of a cameo. You just saw his face. And then in his first full appearance was a little bit later on in the Forever People. But yes, as you mentioned, Cal, deeply steeped in the Jack Kirby Fourth World New Gods era of DC Comics. There's this amazing cosmic wild universe that he sort of created all his own. And as we have talked about probably countless times on this show, there weren't too many bigger fans of Jack Kirby's characters and his art style than the people that made these DCAU cartoons, and we see that on full display right from the very first episode featuring Darkseid and some of the Apokolips characters, that being Tools of the Trade.
That's right. And we really don't get the full reveal until the very end of the episode. But this, of course, involves Bruno Mannheim, who is he's the leader of Intergang. He's the face of Intergang and sort of well-known mobster of Metropolis. And we are he's approached at the very beginning of the episode by somebody that's offering to help him out, sort of this mysterious figure with a very, very suave voice and a nice, great dressed suit.
Who are you?
My name is Cantor, Mr. Mannheim. I've been authorized to offer you some assistance.
By who? Start talking.
Please, put away your so-called weapons. I can assure you they're quite unnecessary. I come bearing gifts.
And he approaches Mr. Mannheim and offers him help, seemingly with no strings attached. But of course, we would come to learn that that wasn't the case later on in the episode. Of course, not only as this mystery man continues to provide these tools to Mannheim and the Intergang, these sort of intergalactic tools that they use in their battles against Superman and continuing to rob Metropolis's various banks, and in their clashes with Superman to various successes. They have some small victories, but ultimately end up sort of succumbing to Superman, of course, because it's Superman. It's his show. His name's on the front of the show, so he's not going to lose. But at the very end of the episode, we kind of get this reveal as Superman has sort of dealt with Intergang and is coming after Mannheim. Mannheim chases after this mysterious man and follows him through this mysterious tube, I guess you could call it, that makes a rather loud noise. And as he chases after him, he realizes he's been transported to another dimension, a hellish looking land. And this mysterious man is revealed to be Kanto, one of the agents of Darkseid. And he kind of returns to his true form at this point, wearing his classic Jack Kirby styled Renaissance festival style costume, and decides, well, it's now time to, he's got to pay the piper at this point for the use of the tools that he's been given. And he's introduced to his new lord and master, the man he seemingly made a deal with the devil with. And we are introduced to this man who declares himself to be Bruno Mannheim's new lord and master. And he introduces himself, of course, as only he can.
Where in God's name are we?
That depends. Which god are you talking about?
Listen, buddy, I'm through with these games. I want some answers. You're gonna tell me who you work for?
Welcome to Apokolips, Mr. Mannheim.
Who are you?
Your new lord and master. You may call me Darkseid.
And it's really a great scene and one of those iconic moments in Superman the Animated Series, probably arguably in the DCAU here, as we get this introduction, as you mentioned, of this character who was long established to be a big bad in the DC universe, but sort of had a mixed past, as we've somewhat discussed on some of our bonus episodes here prior in animation. He did make some appearances in animation prior to the DCAU, of course, showing up in the Super Friends cartoons and some of those offshoot Hanna-Barbera cartoons with superpowers and additional cartoons there, where he's probably best known for his weird obsession with Wonder Woman and trying to marry her, as we documented on one of our bonus episodes of covering Justice League Infinity a few months back. But this really sets the stage as maybe if you had this idea of who Darkseid was, it sort of erases it and even with just the way that scene was drawn, with him being at a higher vantage point than everyone else in the scene, and Kanto literally sort of waving up to him as he introduces himself as Mannheim's new lord and master. He's introduced, and we'll talk about the voice in a little bit as well, but it's just this grand introduction of, holy cow, this is not a guy that you want to mess with.
Yeah, it's a great capper to an episode. As you said, it doesn't really focus on him until the very end, other than, as you mentioned, that Mannheim and Intergame have this mysterious benefactor who's giving them all of these special weapons. It sort of leaves Superman and Dan Turpin, who's also run afoul of Intergang and Apokolips, for what would not be the last time. Sort of leaves them scratching their heads, not sure exactly what they saw or where Mannheim went. So it sets up it's not a true blue cliffhanger necessarily, but it lets us know that really the story is just beginning. And that moves us into a season 2 episode of Superman the Animated Series. That being another very memorable one in Father's Day. Here we get a little bit more Darkseid throughout the episode. We learn a little bit more about Apokolips, sort of the hierarchy, and we know that we are told that Darkseid has grand plans for conquering Earth and total enslavement of the planet Earth, but that he believes they need to destroy Superman before they can take that action, of course. And his son Kalibak, who is throughout the course of the episode shown to sort of be this sort of oafish, barbaric warrior who has never really earned his father's respect or love, takes it upon himself, despite his father's instructions, to go and try to kill Superman himself. An episode that is pretty one note as a narrative from there on out. It's a lot of Superman and Kalibak punching from there. But most importantly, at the end, when Superman has saved his own father, Pa Kent, from a crumbling building and sort of taken care of Kalibak as Kalibak is defeated, a boom tube opens and Darkseid himself steps out and has some words for Kalibak. And then after sort of dealing with him, we get kind of what we've been waiting for since that first episode. We finally get to see Superman and Darkseid face to face for the first time. And of all places, it's just like in a park in the middle of the day.
Sire, I know I disobeyed you, but I thought if I could destroy Superman. And did you? I underestimated his strength, but he won't catch me off guard again. That much, at least, is true. Please, Father! You beg louder than that when I'm done with you.
What have you done to him? I asked you a question. Who are you? Answer me!
That is who I am. And when the time comes, you and this primitive planet will swear allegiance to Darkseid, or you will be destroyed.
Yeah, it's a very odd visual. It's very bright, it's very shiny, it's completely the opposite of what we would generally be used to for the rest of the series, to what we know about Darkseid. It's very opposite of his character. We'll talk about it later on. Some of the visuals that we're used to are the dark clouds and the red skies, and a lot of the later episodes take place actually on Apokolips, which is all dark and shadowy and gray and grimy and gritty. And yeah, this first interaction between the two of them, they're just kind of standing there in the middle of a park. And what I love about that scene though is that Superman goes up to, after Darkseid has taken care of and verbally shamed Kalibak, Superman comes up to him and demands to know who he is. And Darkseid just stands there sort of with his arms behind his back, refusing to answer at first, before we get our first sort of climactic little battle here. We get a little bit of fighting that happens. It's not straight fisticuffs. Superman doesn't get to lay his hands on him, and get our first appearance of the Omega Blasts in this episode also. So we get that again, another trademark, something that I remember, again, not going into, I knew who Darkseid was because he was in this Justice League Super Nintendo game, like a wannabe Mortal Kombat game.
Justice League Task Force.
I remembered him from that. Didn't know a whole lot about him other than he had a figure in the Total Justice line of action figures also. So I knew he was a bad guy. But one of the visuals that I remember, there's a great cover, and I couldn't tell you who the artist is, for shame on me, but just a picture of Darkseid sitting on a throne with his Omega Blast sort of coming out of his eyes, and the way that it was drawn, sort of making those angular movements as opposed to, just being a straight blast out of his eyes. So the fact that they recreated that in such a very Kirby-esque way here for this scene of the Omega Blast's appearance here, it felt true to this character, even though I didn't know a whole lot about him. But I love that this introduction to him is such a badass way for him to be, just not even addressing Superman. Superman's demanding answers for who he is, and he's just shrugging him off. He doesn't care.
Yeah, and that is again, just we're getting little trickles of it. But yes, as he dispatches Superman right as he's about to walk back into the boom tube to head back to Apokolips. After Superman has repeatedly asked him who he is, he's sort of defeated Superman without actually even touching him. And then he looks back at Superman and simply says, "That is who I am," and walks it back into the portal. And that's where our episode ends. It's incredible. And it's, again, just another little nugget that we get there telling us this is nothing like anything Superman's dealt with before. And that really comes to a head as we start out with the first big two-parter of three. Just in Superman alone, Darkseid had two-parters devoted to him. But first off, we had, of course, Apokolips Now parts 1 and 2.
Before we get to that, sorry to interrupt. Before we get to that, I will say also, you can hear our review. We've reviewed all of these episodes already. We review them very early on in the podcast, specifically those last 2 episodes, both Tools of the Trade and Father's Day. We did a double feature. That's all the way back at episode 13. You can listen to that in the archives at DCAUreview.com. Our scores for that, Liam, I gave Tools of the Trade a 22 out of 40. You gave it a 20 out of 40.
Wow.
And for Father's Day, I gave a 19 out of 40, and you gave a 22 out of 40. So not glowing scores for those episodes. I will say earlier on in our scoring, I think we were less generous with some of our.
Have we gone soft in our old age? Because I can't even imagine giving that episode that low of a score, even if it wasn't that interesting.
I will tell you that Father's Day, I do remember us really not liking Father's Day very much based on the plot, but yeah, check out those in the archives at DCAUreview.com if you want to hear our thoughts on the full episodes there. But yes, Apokolips Now is the next appearance.
That's right. So we have Apokolips Now parts 1 and 2, which really begins this sort of sweeping epic, between Earth and Apokolips. And we're introduced to Darkseid's son, Orion. We find out a little bit more about the people of New Genesis, but obviously this is a Darkseid spotlight. So while he is more sort of a specter hanging over the whole scenario in the first part, we do get some wonderful interactions with him and Mannheim and Kalibak and Darkseid as well. Probably all culminating, at least for part 1, in when Mannheim and his crew have decided to cause a nuclear meltdown just outside the city. And when Mannheim talks to Darkseid and tells him that he was told he was going to be made a king, Darkseid tells him, "And so you are the king of fools," and just pieces out on him. And Mannheim is caught in a big, large nuclear explosion.
There it goes. You know, Darkseid, you and me, we make a great team.
Indeed. You have served me well, Mr. Mannheim. And now, farewell.
Huh? But Gibbs, what about me? You promised you'd make me a king!
And so you are, king of fools.
Darkseid? Darkseid! No!
Which that's the end of part. That's our cliffhanger, our first true blue cliffhanger for this Darkseid character, as he uses people as much as he can get out of them, and then he will have no problem dispatching them in whatever way he sees fit. And that sets up part 2, which is really just all about him just running Superman ragged throughout this as we get into this second part.
Yeah, and going back to remembering seeing this episode for the first time, and this was one of the episodes we did have at least part 2 on videotape at some point, so it was one that we could revisit several times. Mm-hmm. I remember just the anxiety of the invasion part of this, because the storyline, Kalibak goes back to Darkseid begging for the opportunity for redemption, and in true Darkseid Kalibak relationship fashion, Darkseid questions and says, "Are you kidding me? No, I'm not gonna send you back again. You're a failure. I'm not gonna send you." So he sends Steppenwolf, again, somebody who in more recent years has become a more prominent figure, obviously having played a huge role in the Snyder cut of the Justice League movie and in the original Whedon cut of the Justice League movie. So Steppenwolf gets sent to Earth with parademons to lead this invasion, and they do their best to just wreak as much havoc, and the parademons create their own sort of violent and scary type visuals as they're blacking out the sky, and they're attacking Superman. Superman gets overwhelmed. The skies of Metropolis turn blood red after this nuclear explosion or nuclear meltdown. And so there's a lot that happens in this episode, and Darkseid finally makes an appearance after all of this has happened, and after it seems that Earth's defenses have been weakened. He literally rolls into Metropolis after having this one-on-one battle with Superman, where he's pretty much defeated Superman at this point. Superman has become sort of a prize to him. He puts him up on the top of this humongous, gigantic, like it dwarfs the Dark Knight Returns Batmobile at this point. Like, it's a gigantic tank, and Superman is sort of his glorified hood ornament, so to speak. They're just sort of captured, sort of in a star-crossed pose there, as he sort of parades Superman through the city as this fallen hero, and shows them that hey, I've defeated your hero, and I'm here to triumph over you.
People of Earth, I am Darkseid, Lord of Apokolips. Here is your savior, cowed and broken. I have crushed him as easily as I have crushed all who have dared to oppose me throughout the cosmos. I am power unlike any you have known. Absolute, infinite, and unrelenting. You have no choice but to prepare for a long, dark future as my subjects and my slaves.
In a pig's eye! This is our world, Ugly. You won't get it without a fight.
You hear that, Darkseid? The people of Earth aren't like your slaves on Apokolips. They don't take kindly to dictators.
If they resist, I will not hesitate to destroy them.
And just as it looks like things are defeated, that's when we get the return of Orion to show up to sort of cause Darkseid to stand down. And most of New Genesis arrives with him as well. We get some of the other new gods arriving with him, and Darkseid decides at that moment that he does not want to break a treaty with the new gods, and that goes deep into the lore of the Jack Kirby New Gods versus New Genesis versus Apokolips lore there. But they have this sort of treaty between the two of them. So in order to prevent that from being broken at that point, he decides to stand down, but not before one of the most heart-wrenching, heartbreaking moments I'm going to say it, in the history of DC animation.
Undoubtedly, yeah. It's funny you mentioned, there as just before he rolls the tank in, there's this scene. Superman has just finally dealt with the nuclear meltdown, and he's sort of trying to catch his breath, and Darkseid sort of appears to him, and that scene and then the following scene, I feel like really gets to the heart of the Jack Kirby characters in a way that I don't know too many other adaptations have, to my satisfaction. It's so Shakespearean. There's a lot of like biblical inferences.
Yeah, it's
like Satan tempting Jesus in the wilderness.
It's the last temptation of Christ. Yep.
Yeah, they're like there's a lot, and it's very Shakespearean. And
you're a magnificent opponent, Superman. But even you must realize it's hopeless.
Darkseid.
I could easily destroy you now. And once you're gone, the pathetic beings of this planet won't have the will to resist me. The few who survive, that is. However, if you join me as my loyal vassal, I could guarantee a modicum of restraint. Think of it, Superman. The power you have now, it's nothing compared with what I'm offering you.
You know I can't do that.
Pity. Still, if you won't be my knight, you will be my pawn.
Dramatic, and again, that's certainly already the music and the voice acting also plays into that. We'll get to that in a few minutes here, but and then yes, as you said, literally stringing him up and as a hood ornament on this giant tank, and parading him through Metropolis as he announces that their Earth's greatest champion has been defeated, and then as you said, New Genesis arrives just in the nick of time to sort of stop any further bloodshed, but sort of just because even in sort of a semi-defeat, or at the very least a stalemate here, Darkseid still has to prove that he's going to be the true victor. And he tells Superman that while he can savor this moment of triumph for now, but victory will always have its price. And that results in the death of Dan Turpin at the hands of Darkseid, or at the Omega Beam eye lasers of Darkseid.
I won't quibble over this insignificant speck in the universe. I would hate to spoil our reunion with bloodshed. Your turn.
Go on, you mangy buzzards, and don't come back.
Savor your moment of triumph, Superman. But remember, victory has its price.
We've talked about this a lot. It was rare to see blood, or even punches to the face could be a little bit dicey sometimes, getting them through standards and practices for these cartoons, much less a on-screen death. And yes, he's vaporized, you don't see a skeleton or blood or anything, but it was still a death, and it's a really powerful moment. Dan Turpin had been in a ton of episodes, including, as we mentioned, an earlier, New Gods themed episode in Tools of the Trade. And so having this moment of where it seems like the good guys have won and all is going to be restored to the status quo here, to have sort of a major recurring character killed in this battle, it'll I think anyone who watched that as a kid especially, but even if you watch it now, I think, and it just sticks with you, it gives you goosebumps, and it really just sets up once again, it's just coming back to that refrain of that Darkseid is really truly more vicious, more forgiving than anyone else that any hero in the DCAU has ever fought before.
Yeah, and it leads, ultimately that death leads to what I would say is probably a top 5 emotionally heart-wrenching scene in the DCAU, which is Dan Turpin's funeral and Superman standing at his grave and Yiskadal v'yiskadash merabo be'olamo divrach Yeruseh v'yamlich malchuseh b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol beis Yisrael bagalav izman kariv v'meru. Amen.
Goodbye, old friend. In the end, the world didn't really need a Superman. Just a brave one.
Just the visuals from all of that, that it's giving me chills now thinking about it. So all of that because of the ruthless nature in which they decided to make this Darkseid character appear. It was heartbreaking, and it made you like, there's nothing better than a heel, if you want to say it, if you want to use the terminology, that you hate. Crossover, right? You have to, like, you want to hate the bad guys. You have, it's so cool nowadays to make a bad guy an anti-hero, and you want to make shades of gray, and maybe he's not as bad as you thought he was. And honestly though, and I think the comparison between Darkseid could be made to a character like Thanos, who of course is his mirror opposite in Marvel. And one of the issues that I had with Marvel was that I felt like they tried to, at parts in various parts of those movies, make Thanos, you could from a certain point of view see Thanos as a sympathetic character. There was a motivation behind what he was doing that could be looked at from some point of view to say, all right, well, he's doing it for this reason. Darkseid does everything that he does in the DCAU because he's evil. There's no shades of gray. Like, he is evil. There is no liking this guy at all. And this just cemented that fact. And then, of course, this is something that will come back later on in further down the line. This motivation of avenging. Hey, that's a crossover. Avenging Dan Turpin's death there. So, it's a great episode. I will say you can check that out in the archives at DCAUreview.com. We covered that on episode 15, so way back there. And you and I, again, I think we've gone soft in our later episodes here, because you gave it a 30 out of 40. I do remember the animation in part 2 not being great. I remember us having some issues.
Yes, I do remember that as well.
Despite some of the memorable visuals, that the animation overall, there were some issues in part 2, and I gave it a 28 out of 40. So not super high marks for these episodes, but hugely impactful and some of the most memorable scenes and lines throughout the entire Superman the Animated Series and in those episodes and this series of episodes for sure.
Absolutely. And I just want to go back to what you said just for a second here about the unrelenting evil that Darkseid is really only seeing. Everything he looks at, every planet, every world, every person is just something that is conquered. And it's, it was very, very clearly informed. Again, Jack Kirby served in World War II, and fought and killed killed fascists and Nazis. And you can tell when he was writing the story, there's very clear parallels to real world dictators here, and to make Darkseid this completely unrelenting force that all he is interested in is conquering and dominating, and whatever gratification he wants, and he will take by force. And really, just it could not have been enforced any better than in that 2-part episode, Apokolips Now. And again, as Cal said, we will be leaving a lot of the other big DCAU Darkseid moments for Volume 2, but we have one more, or technically a pair of episodes to talk about for this Volume 1, and that is Darkseid has a very sort of minor appearance in the episodes that introduce Supergirl to the DCAU, that being Little Girl Lost parts 1 and 2. Darkseid himself only does appear briefly in part 2. Obviously, his shadow looms over it, as we do get the introduction of Granny Goodness and the female Furies, as well as some new sides of Intergang and some other Fourth World characters. I think we can probably do a character spotlight on Granny one day. So
for sure, probably the rest. We might lump them into like the rest of the
a New Gods spotlight.
There we go. Like, yeah, love that.
But yeah, so we won't focus too much on that. But yes, we do once again see Darkseid. Superman is captured and brought to Apokolips. Supergirl is able to save him, and since he is no longer able to invade Earth, he decides to allow Granny and her gang to create a device that is going to magnetically pull an asteroid towards the Earth. If he can't have the Earth, if he can't conquer the Earth, nobody can. So again, just not only is he this horrible, uncompromising monster, but he's also a sore loser, as we find out. If the Dan Turpin thing didn't nail that home hard enough, he also is going to sort of try to cause an asteroid to hit the Earth, just to sort of skirt around the whole can't attack the Earth without the treaty with New Genesis being ruined. So again, a minor appearance for him, but again, just reminding us that he's still out there, and that Superman and his final battles are yet to come.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fun one. Also, we covered that one a little bit later in the series. We covered that on episode 57 in the archives at DCAUreview.com. And our scores, out of all of the Apocalyptian Darkseid featured episodes, this is the one that we enjoyed the most out of these, at least. I gave a score of 35 out of 40, and you gave a 33 out of 40 for this 2-parter. There is some fun. There's a lot of Ed Asner in this as Granny, God rest his soul. Just doing great Ed Asner as Granny Goodness stuff. We have the introduction of her Furies and lots of great interactions there. We get the introduction, of course, this is Supergirl's first appearance, but I think the fact that we know, and this episode lets us figure out that, hey, yes, we know that Darkseid isn't finished because of the way that episode ended with Apokolips Now, that hey, he's still around and he's still hell-bent on creating as much chaos or destruction as possible, even with working outside of the bounds of this covenant agreement that he has with the New Gods and New Genesis. So very, very interesting that they, of course, left the door open for him to continue to return. And ultimately, we're going to, as you said, we're going to stop here with our feature as far as the episodes are concerned. We know that perhaps his most impactful moment is his next and final appearance in the Superman the Animated Series, which will be a good segue once we get to our Volume 2 here. Liam, I will briefly talk about, I guess we can move on to sort of talking a little bit about some of the visuals and stuff. But I do think that as far as this character is concerned, while there is definitely a Bruce Timm spin on this, that it's not surprising that he ended up, and that the character designers ended up keeping a very Jack Kirby faithful design for this character. They did change up a few things, gave him a little bit darker of a costume instead of the more traditional light blue. He's got a dark blue with a sort of blue cell shading highlights, very similar to the Batman the animated series costume, where you have the blue highlights. They gave him purple pants for a lot of it. I think there are some scenes, perhaps in Apokolips Now, where his pants end up being blue. So that wasn't necessarily always consistent, but I think for the character design, and it's a design that they ultimately sort of maintained throughout, even through Justice League Unlimited. There was a little bit of a redesign in his first appearance, which we'll talk about later on, and then of course an ultimate redesign for his final appearances. But I think that they were pretty faithful in keeping this very Jack Kirby-esque, but also making sure that it had its own unique identity set within the DCAU.
Absolutely, yeah. It fits right in with this DCAU world again that was already so heavily influenced by Jack Kirby, Bruce Timm's art style, as well as several of the other directors and artists and animators who worked on this show were also influenced by him. So yeah, not surprisingly, perhaps Darkseid fit right in. I think one of the other things, and again, this will probably be more evident in a volume 2 of this, but they also, I think in some of the more recent animations and even in the live action movie, he's sort of portrayed as being like 9 feet tall and almost like a doomsday size character. And I kind of like it that he's obviously he's a bit bigger than Superman. He's wider, but he's not necessarily meant to be this giant, like oversized monster character. Because I think part of the fascination with Darkseid is in all of these early appearances, he doesn't jump down and throw a punch a single time. He barely, breaks his, as you mentioned, Billy barely pulls his hands from behind his back for most of his appearances, even when he is sort of technically engaging in any kind of combat. So I always like that, just the very militaristic and proper way that he sort of is constantly standing and walking and all of that. I thought played very well. And also just the size of the character, he still feels very imposing and scary, but isn't necessarily going so far into like the Godzilla size version almost. So definitely think they nailed the look for Darkseid and a lot of those New Gods characters. And speaking now that we've talked about the looks and the sort of the narrative of Darkseid here in Volume 1, we would be remiss not to mention what else, the music and sort of the main Darkseid theme in particular, which again we first hear in Tools of the Trade as Darkseid announces that he is Bruno Mannheim's new lord and master and speaks his own name for the first time in the series. Just a tremendous piece of music by Kristopher Carter begins to play, and that refrain is brought back throughout the rest of his appearances in the series.
Yeah, it's a tremendous piece, and it's one that I'll admit here, if you would ask me to pick it out, couldn't have done it. But you sent me a clip that first appearance, as we mentioned in Tools of the Trade, where he sort of has the big reveal of who he is. If you isolate that music, or if you just have that clip, which you posted on our social media this week, you can check us out at DCAU Review. And that piece, it just sets the tone for who this character is. This is somebody, again, this is a foe that is quite formidable. He's evil, and he's borderline the devil based on what we're telling you here, based on not only visuals but the music here and the scenery around everything in that scene, the fire, the appearance of Kanto with the horn sort of on his hat, and everything about that scene is like, this guy's the devil. This guy's pure evil here, and the music really emphatically brings that home with the way that Mr. Carter produced that piece. Just a tremendous piece of work that does indeed come back later on, of course, in that scene as he's parading Superman through Metropolis, and then throughout the rest of the series. It really is established as the theme of, hey, this guy is evil incarnate.
Absolutely, yeah. And thankfully, we've talked about it before, not all of the Superman the animated series music is available on a soundtrack, unfortunately, but that track in particular, I believe, is it's referred to as Planet Apokolips, I believe is the name of the track. But yeah, it's again, it just talk about setting a tone. It's nothing better than that. And speaking of setting a tone, all right, as listeners know, we've talked about the plots, we've talked about our visuals, we've talked about our music. So what do we have left? Of course, Cal, we have our voice actor. And you talk about a person, and again, all praise be on this show. Give praise to Andrea Romano, of course, the voice and casting director on the shows for many, many years. But you talk about an actor and again a voice director who just nailed the character from moment one, and that is Michael Ironside as Darkseid.
Yeah, it's somebody who he from beginning to end, he played the role perfectly. He's an incredible foil. I think we talked about it perhaps on the review for Tools of the Trade. It felt like they put maybe a little bit of an effect on his voice, or it may have just been because of the scenery there in that initial introduction. But throughout the rest,
think it's there a little bit in Father's Day as well. I think they sort of gradually tone it down, and then by Apokolips Now, I think it's completely gone, and it's just his natural voice, which is great because, I mean, of all people, you don't really have to mess with him to make Michael Ironside sound imposing.
Yeah, he pretty much he doesn't need any help with that. He's a pretty intimidating sounding voice on his own, which is probably why he was cast. So I do appreciate the fact that they did pare that back. We've talked about it several times in recent months, and certainly with Superman the Animated Series, how sometimes those sound design can sometimes work against the enjoyment of the program. Not always, but sometimes can take away sometimes from the episode. So I don't think that it takes anything away necessarily from the initial episodes. It is a very impactful way to introduce the character, but I will say that I appreciate that they ended up sort of toning that back all the way and allowing Mr. Ironside's true vocal performance to come through, because it's great. It's fantastic. He fits the part well. He knew exactly what the assignment was, as the kids say. And he fulfilled his role to the T. He comes across as an adversary, a willing adversary to Earth's mightiest hero in Superman. And not only that, but he also, as we mentioned, he clearly at times, because of his evil nature, he savors the ability to torture Superman or to inflict extra pain. It's not just enough for him to conquer or to be evil or to rule. It's the enjoyment that he gets out of, the extra inflicting of pain or chaos or destruction. There's additional enjoyment, and Mr. Ironside's performance communicates that so incredibly well, I think, in each and every way. I think that his dynamic with Kalibak, as we mentioned, also there is a dark humor to it, because Kalibak can never do anything right, but it's not played for humor. There's nothing about it that says that Darkseid is anything but completely sincere in his disdain and disappointment for this failure schlub of a son. And it's communicated extremely well through Mr. Ironside's his performances. So we throw around perfect casting on the show a lot, and I'm going to say it again. This is a perfect casting because he is this character embodied.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's as you mentioned, those it's just there's nobody that I could imagine doing it as perfectly as he did, especially for this version of the character. And yeah, whether it's in those sort of, as you said, those quieter moments when he's just speaking with disdain towards Desaad or Granny or any of these other subordinate characters like Kalibak, or when he's making his grand speech to the people of Earth, and he's, his voice is booming, and he's, talking about how he's, bloodied and beaten their greatest hero and all of that. And every moment of that is just dripping with just sinister energy. And Mr. Ironside is absolutely a tremendous choice for that role. Definitely, as we often talk about with these voice actors, 100% that's the voice you hear in your head if you're reading a Darkseid comic or anything like that. So absolutely a tremendous job by Mr. Ironside. Now that we've covered, I think, all of the elements of the on-screen Darkseid, at least for Volume 1 here, Cal. Before we get out of here, we will make mention of some of his appearances in the Superman animated series tie-in comic, which of course was called Superman Adventures. He actually appeared in quite a few issues, though very rarely was he sort of the main character or the main threat. Usually he's just sort of around in them, sort of the threat looms, kind of as often he was in the earlier appearances in the series. But he appeared in Superman Adventures 21, 28, 41, 53, 65, and 66, with 66 being the final issue of the series. Any tie-in comic book adventures featuring Darkseid that stand out to you?
Well, first of all, if I may mention, all of these issues are available on the wonderful, amazing DC Universe app, my favorite app that I have on my phone. Just a tremendous way to enjoy DC Comics. If you're a DC Comics fan, highly advise you checking out this app. It's a wonderful app.
It sure is.
But yeah, speaking of highlights, I did before, just for research, before we got on the air, I went back and read some of these and skimmed through some of them. And the one that stood out to me, we read all of these. We had all of these, I'm pretty sure, when we were growing up. And the one that stuck out to me, which I would not have remembered it if I had a gun to my head, but I remembered it instantly after seeing the cover and then flipping through the pages. But Superman Adventures number 28 sticks out to me. It's an episode or an issue written by the famous Mark Millar, and penciled by Mike Manley and inked by Terry Austin. The cover is actually by Mr. Rick Burchett and another familiar name, Terry Austin, and Marie Severin also worked on this one. But the reason why this one stands out to me, not just the fantastic cover by Mr. Burchett, who it says this is a job for Jimmy Olsen ? And it's got Jimmy Olsen doing the shirt reveal with the Superman logo, standing in front of Calabac, some parademons, and the Darkseid statue that is, of course, the main visible reminder that you are on Apokolips. So we get a story called Jimmy versus Darkseid. And what happens is we go through the issue, and there's just a completely out of 1954 Superman story where Superman and Jimmy swap brains or swap bodies. There's like a body swap one that occurs because
that old thing.
Calabac comes to Earth and has this weapon and uses this mind swap thing. He then captures Jimmy, who is Superman in Jimmy's body, and brings him back to Apokolips. Darkseid is angry because he feels like he's sort of broken the treaty with the New Gods and isn't happy that he's brought Superman Jimmy to Apokolips. And this, of course, leaves the opposite, of course, true. So back on Earth, we have Superman's body with Jimmy Olsen's brain in it, and Jimmy has to be Superman. And there's, of course, a climax where the two of them their two paths cross, and Superman as Jimmy and Jimmy as Superman have to save the day. And it's so wacky. It's straight out of that sci-fi goofy, silver age of comic books, or golden age of comic books. That just
100%.
It's so goofy. It would not play on television as a good episode. It would probably be towards the bottom. I don't know if it would get a 0 score from us, but probably. But it's just so goofy, and it's a lot of fun, and it brought back good memories of reading that growing up. So that was the one that stuck out for me. What about you? Any of the other ones stick out for you?
So for me, I would probably say it's issue 41, which is actually a really fun sort of conceit, which is it's 22 pages, and each page is its own story. and I believe that issue was by Mark Miller, and yes, it's just one page of all of these sights and sounds of Apokolips, so to speak, and a voiceover talking about the all of this the grand kingdom of Apokolips that Darkseid has at his disposal. But I believe it's Desaad asks him, and even though you have all of this already, I constantly just see you staring out into space, looking upset. What could you possibly, look at all of this around you that you have. Look at the glory of the kingdom of Apokolips, and it's pretty subtle. It's just he doesn't even look at Desaad. He's still sort of staring off into space, and you can see an image of Superman on like a monitor behind them, and he just simply says, "It's not enough." And that's all he says. It's a one-page story. That is one of my favorite DCAU comics of any that I think I've ever read. Is that 22 pages, 22 stories issue of Superman Adventures number 41. So, but that Darkseid story, again, just as simple as that is, I think is, again, just a great encapsulation of that character. So
yeah, who's who of artists in that whole issue too. Really, you got Ty Templeton, Rick Burkett, Craig Rousseau. You have Darwin Cook. Amongst a lot, Mike Manley, who was a guy who did a lot of art for that whole entire run of Superman Adventures. You have really a who's who of those DCAU artists there, all doing single page stories that are sort of not necessarily related to one another, but are perfectly encapsulated on one page. But yeah, that one I feel like I think the story is called The World According to Darkseid or something like that. And it's such a great, it perfectly encapsulates that character and his motivation and that motivation of evil, of just never being satisfied. He needs more and more and more, that greed. I love that. That's great.
Absolutely, Cal. And as that begins to wrap us up, we have one final category that we will touch on. Not a lot to talk about in this section, but we, of course, are talking about merchandise, and in particular, action figures and statues. Where, again, since we're only focusing on this first volume in Superman the Animated Series, we'll stick to specifically Superman the Animated Series branded Darkseid stuff here. So really, we only have two things to talk about, one action figure and one statue. Am I right?
Yeah, I was looking to see, there might be some international international fast food toys or something like that. I was trying to do some look-sees here, maybe a HeroClick or two also that represents his time. I know HeroClix did some series based on DCAU properties. Not sure if it was Superman or based on Justice League, because there was some kind of mishmashing in between different sets. But yeah, for the most part, we have Kenner's Omega Blast Superman, which I only ever remember seeing in stores one time. And it's pretty faithful. I feel like it's a pretty faithful representation of what it would look like as a Bruce Timm drawing. Didn't quite look like what he looked like in the show. His pants were very purple, and they painted his whole tunic black. So it's a cool looking figure, and it's definitely bigger than the rest of the Superman figures in the line, but maybe a little bit too big, maybe like an Incredible Hulk size from my recollection. This is one that I've never actually owned. Very interested in perhaps procuring one in the future, but it's not a cheap figure actually. So if you're looking to shell out some pennies for it, save them. It's not too expensive, but not one that you're going to get on the dollar bin either.
Yeah, I think my memory of this figure is that I don't think I knew it existed until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I think I stumbled across it in eBay or a Google search or something, and because I was aware, obviously, and we'll get to that in future episodes. He had a few figures in the Justice League lines, but I was not even aware that there was a Superman the Animated Series Darkseid figure. yeah, that was sort of my note on it too. He's a little too big, and it's a good looking figure, but it doesn't quite capture.
It's also squatting. He's got like a weird squat going on.
Yes. It's like I said, it's impressive that they even made a figure that big at the time, because I think a lot of the characters, even if they were physically bigger at the time, were sometimes in that kind of line would be a little small. I always remember being disappointed in the Killer Croc figure at the time, but for sure, yeah, it's a nice figure. And obviously, if you're any kind of completist for Superman the Animated Series merchandise or anything, then you gotta have it. But it's not even the best DCAU Darkseid figure, to say the least. But then our only other piece of merch, other than, as you mentioned, maybe some international Happy Meal toys or something like that, we have a Diamond Select statue, like a bust statue, and I believe it's also a piggy bank.
Yeah, I'm seeing it listed as a resin bust and also as a bank, so I'm not sure if they're two different things, because they look a little different based on what I'm seeing here. One looks like a resin bust, both created by Diamond Select, and the other one looks like it could be a bank. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I do see that it's about the bust at least is about 6 inches tall. It is a bust. It's truly just him from the waist up. He does have the classic sort of Kirby stance for Darkseid, which is another thing that they incorporated in the show several times. There's several great shots of him standing there with his arms bent at a 90-degree angle, sort of holding his own wrist behind his back, which is a great sort of, feels like a very militaristic stance for a military leader in charge of, sort of surveying the scene as the invasion is occurring, or just sort of an at ease, like not quite threatened, very cocky, assured of oneself that they don't even have to have your hands in front of you, sort of stance. But yeah, that from what I'm seeing, it might be the only additional merchandise, which if you have something else that we may have missed, feel free to tweet us at DCAU Review, or comment on one of our posts on Instagram at DCAU Review, because other than maybe some t-shirts or stuff like that may have been sold at the Warner Brothers store, there's always that merchandise too that we sleep on occasionally. You never know, some of that stuff pops up from time to time, stuff you never knew existed from the Warner Brothers store. But from what we saw, it's a very limited amount of merchandise out there that featured Superman, Darkseid from Superman the Animated Series.
Absolutely, yeah. Not as many collectibles as one would like for Darkseid. Again, being that he was such a big part of the series, but still cool that he at least has a figure. There's a lot of, I think there's certain Superman characters who didn't even get a figure made, or at least not a good one. So at least he got that far to it. But as that begins to wrap us up here. Thank you everybody for listening. We definitely want to hear feedback on these. As always, we want to know what your favorite Darkseid moment of these episodes we talked about in Volume 1 here is. And generally your thoughts on the music, on the voice acting. Do you wish we had seen more of him throughout the earlier episodes? Should they have teased him out a little bit more before he finally showed up? Would love to hear your feedback on all of that, and sort of what your favorite moments are with this character, and what you would like to hear next as far as character spotlight episodes. We're not necessarily doing one every single month, but as Cal and I have talked about on and off the air, with a finite amount of episodes remaining for us to cover, I think you will start to see us work these in a little bit more frequently as the weeks and months and years go on here. So having a lot of fun talking with this, and it's always fun to reminisce these episodes, especially in this case, Cal, episodes that we covered way back there in the very early days of our podcast, just burning through all those Supermans, and it was definitely fun. It's rough, but it was so it was great under this lens of a character spotlight on Darkseid that we got to revisit some of that today.
Absolutely. Yeah. We love to hear your thoughts too. So we've done 2 villains and and a tweener, I guess, a hero that turned into a villain that went back to being a hero, or, that could have been a villain. So, we'd love to hear your suggestions if you're looking at some. Obviously, we're looking for characters that we've already covered the bulk of, or a lot of what they've, a lot of their character arc, throughout. So we're not gonna, and it has to be a character. If it's a big character, it's not going to be everything in one episode. We've already said, if you suggest the Joker, it's not going to be a full encapsulation of that, because we'll be here for a couple hours doing that. So if you have some lesser known or smaller characters, or hey, if there's a theme like we mentioned before, maybe some a New Gods episode down the line, we can feature some of these smaller characters and talk about their appearances and some of the tie-ins and their, some of their merchandise, then hey, let us know. We'll be happy to focus on maybe a theme also for a spotlight episode. But yeah, had a lot of fun talking about Darkseid, and certainly excited as we get through some of these later Justice League Unlimited series in the future, covering some of those later appearances of Darkseid and his everlasting shadow that seemed to cast over the DCAU. So yeah, lots of fun. But Liam, we are actually turning the page, because this is the final Saturday of the month, and that means that we're going to be covering something new next month. But before then, I think we have to take a brief trip around the multiverse. What do you say?
That is absolutely right, Cal. I love that idea. We are going to be doing an Elseworlds review next week, episode 199. We actually already said what we're doing on somebody else's podcast, but so we do have something kind of big planned for 200 and beyond. Actually, some fun stuff coming up, but we have 199, which we're equally as excited about. And I don't know if anyone's heard, but there's a new Batman movie coming out.
What?
I know. I mean, you a commercial for it or something, but
you know what? I did get Little Caesars the other day, and Little Caesars, my calzone was in the shape of a bat. I thought that was very strange.
Well, yes. So to try to do nothing else but capitalize on hashtags and search engine optimization, we will in fact be covering a very apt episode of the Batman of the animated 2004 series titled The Batman, and we will be reviewing the episode Ruled. So a fun tie-in there with the movies. We'll probably try to do something like that there's like 18 DC movies coming out this year, so we'll have some opportunities to do some fun stuff and maybe some themed months around certain characters when those films come out. But for The Batman the movie, we are going to be looking at The Batman the show and their introduction of their version of the Riddler next week, so that should be a lot of fun, Cal.
It should be awesome. What's the name of the episode?
It is in fact called Riddled.
There we go. Sorry, you dropped out there. That's great. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the movie. Who isn't? And certainly excited to cover another show that's been getting some love. We know that it's coming out on getting an HD release, I believe, this year on Blu-ray. So very excited to give a deserving show that doesn't get a whole lot of love. Because of the shadow that sort of casts over it from the DCAU, but something that a lot of people have a lot of love for. So excited to talk about their very unique spin on the Riddler. Can't wait.
Absolutely, Cal. Thank you, everybody, again for listening, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or perhaps you are listening / watching on the Pod Tower YouTube channel. We thank you, and wherever you are listening, if you could make sure you're subscribed to us, and if the app you're listening to allows you to leave us a review or give us 5 stars or anything like that, we would appreciate the time you take to do that. You can also visit us at DCAUreview.com. We have a store up there. You can get yourself a shirt or a mug or something, help support the pod that way. You can also head to anchor.fm/DCAUreview. That's sort of our main hosting site where you can find all of our episodes. But a lot of fun stuff coming up for our podcast as we approach episode 200. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.